All right, how are you guys doing? It is great to be here with you and to make the final post for Toxic Charity discussion. As you know, we're hoping in the coming weeks to actually meet all together in person to just kind of discuss our learning, and also especially chapter 10 is a very practical chapter that really talks about what are the steps we think we should take. And so I like that. I think it's a great way to end, and it's a great way to kind of summarize everything we've been doing. So I'll be emailing about that, and hopefully we can actually get our crazy schedules to work so that we can actually sit down and chat about what we see God doing here at New Song. So today's post, though, we are discussing chapters 7 through 9 and really working through some of the issues of the oath of compassionate service and just a few highlights that I want to make. All right, so 3 things this morning. First is due diligence for wise giving. He said that's a really, really important aspect that all people should do as a part of their stewardship before God. We should say, if we're giving money towards something, we need to do due diligence beforehand, and then also during, as we're giving. Hey, is my money being invested wisely? Is my time being invested wisely? And he really promotes the idea of taking the long view. So with community development, with these compassionate services, we really need to think about what is the long-term view. And he gives 4 pretty helpful questions, I think. He asks, is leadership rising in the people we're serving? Is there greater control over their lives? Are they gaining control over their lives, making good decisions? Are we seeing real life transformation? Are their aspirations on the rise? And is there a positive trajectory to their life? So these are all ways that we can begin to do due diligence. I also really appreciate that he points out, you know what? Quantifying ministry is a lot harder than quantifying our bank account. In our bank account, it's pretty obvious. You look at it one month, and there's this amount of money, and if it's more the next month, then you know you've made money, and if it's less, you know that you haven't, right? So it's a very simple calculation, and I appreciate that he points out, you know what? Ministry is not as simple as looking at your bank account and seeing if that dollar number is higher or lower. So I'm thankful that he points that out, but he also is trying to say, but you can't throw all calculations out either, right? There are ways of seeing, are the people we're partnering with, are the people we're serving, are they able to get jobs? Are they able to have a positive trajectory? Are we beginning to see over time, as we have these beginning mutually reciprocal relationships, are we seeing them grow as people or not? And in what way is our ministry either furthering that or not furthering that? So I think that's a really good, it's a helpful thing to think about. The second thing I want to point out from the post is the oath of compassionate service. I really think this is a helpful guideline. I have to say it's challenging. It has convicted me when I've looked at my past compassion efforts and even some of the future or current ones that I'm doing. But I really think this is helpful. It harkens back to what we talked about, I think, in the first post, especially the idea of not doing for others what they probably can do for themselves. Are our ministries doing those things, or are they really providing services or providing partnerships where they are getting greater control, where they're moving forward in life, and where we're not doing something that they can do for themselves? So I think maybe even going back over that chapter and seeing how he fleshes out each part, I think it is a great guideline for us to consider in our own individual lives, in our compassion efforts, and when we see other compassion efforts as well. Finally, the third highlight I want to point out is how well do we know our immediate neighbors? I know he makes part of their FCS strategy is to actually have people move into the neighborhood in order to bring about its great healing. Now, I want to admit, and I think that that's challenging, and I'm not fully convinced of every aspect to that. And I'm also not fully convinced only because our context at New Song is very different than his in Atlanta. We have some unique challenges as a commuter church, right? We draw people from Upland, we draw people from Claremont, from San Dimas, Azusa, Glendora, these surrounding areas, and it's not simple. Chris and I live in Pasadena, and the reason we came here originally is before I knew her, I knew when I went up to Azusa Pacific that I wanted to find a church in the local area. I didn't want to be commuting far. So for me, 4 or 5 miles away, like honestly, I think that's a great, healthy balance. I don't think that's too far away, if you will. So that's where I lived until we got married. And thankfully, due to the wonderful reality of the 210 freeway, we knew that we had to move away from Glendora out to Pasadena so that she could attend Fuller and so that she wouldn't be losing, between 2 and 3 hours a day on traffic. We weren't okay with that. And so we felt good about that, but we knew ever since it's happened, it's almost been 3 years now, we knew that our partnerships and our relationships with New Song would suffer in some ways because we're further away from everyone. And we knew that this was a tension that we said, hey, this is not something we want to see long term. We know you've got to get your degree, finish that up, but we do not desire to live far away from our church community because I think it disables deeper levels of community. You just can't rub your life against other people's lives as frequently as we would like. So I think there's something here when he asks, how well do we know our neighbors? I don't know how that, when you even hear that question, if you know your immediate neighbors or not. But I think it's really important, and I'm very convinced that this is a part of loving our neighbor as ourselves, are the immediate people right next to us. It's a challenge in California. I think it's a California culture to not, as a whole, to not know your neighbors is no big deal. My parents have lived on the street that I grew up in for the last 29 years, almost 29 years, and they honestly, the only people they know are the people who we used to play with when we were growing up. So they know those parents because of the children. It really wasn't because of them. They honestly do not know their own neighbors, and they lived on the same block for 29 years. So I just point that out, not to make fun of them, but just to say it is a cultural difficulty. But I think it's a good word. God, help me to know my neighbors. What ministry opportunities will develop here as we just enter into regular neighborly relationships, as we begin to see needs surface? What does your gospel have to say here? What do you want to do in these people's lives, and how do you want me to partner? So I think those are great insights from those 3 chapters. Now I want to close with, again, kind of leaving us what questions I would love to see you respond to on the email post. What from these chapters are really worth, I'd love to hear your voice on. And the main one I'd love for you guys to focus on, if you have an opportunity, is looking back at that oath of compassionate service. And the first thing I want you to do, if you're willing, is think about that oath, and is there any aspects you don't like? And as a whole, do you agree with it? So kind of just a basic summary of, yeah, I really like this, or these are the parts that I think fall a little bit, but as a whole, this oath of compassionate service is great. Or, hey, if you totally disagree with it, then you totally disagree with it. But I would love to hear some just general reflections on the oath of compassionate service. And the second thing is, which areas of the oath so then evaluate your ministry. What areas is your ministry falling short of, according to that oath of compassionate service? Which areas are doing really well, where you go, yeah, I feel like my area really lines up well with this. So again, just kind of analyzing it individually and analyzing it for your ministry context. Super excited. Thank you so much for doing this. I've loved being able to post week after week, and I'm really looking forward to getting us all in the same room together in the coming weeks. All right, blessings to you, and I look forward to hearing your post.